This is Stock Retail coming back to you on a Sunday afternoon, my time. If you're East Coast, maybe Sunday night. If you're elsewhere in the world, probably all different hours. Um, I had kind of offhand said today, boy, a lot of the movies, or really all the movies, are kind of tracking not only ahead of my forecast, but ahead of even some industry forecasts. And I was thinking, boy, maybe I should share out how we're tracking against forecast, what that might look like for the rest of the quarter, and what that even means for the rest of the year. Got a couple positive responses to that on Twitter, and so I thought, okay, fine, I'm going to do this. um, I'll give you a little bit of insight into my forecasts, still not sharing all of the sausage making, as it were, but I'll share a little bit more of what I'm looking at and what my views are. And as always, on this channel, I say no trust me, bros or sisters. So go ahead and question these numbers. I'm just giving you line of sight into some ways that I'm thinking, some things that I'm seeing, and frankly, I'm just being a little excited because numbers are tracking very well, and so that's exciting. Like we should be able to celebrate, especially for those of us who not only love the stock but love the movies. So let's, without further ado, kind of go into that. Obviously it's a pretty early readout, right? It's early January, well, mid-January, but still things were tracking so well ahead that I just thought it's worth covering. So, what we're going to cover here: box office updates. Like I said, we'll look at Q1, how's it tracking. We'll look at what that may mean. I'll kind of describe how conservative I was with the forecast on some things, where maybe I was bullish with the forecast, and kind of look out to the full year. We'll click down on what really is driving this so much in Q1, and then we'll talk a little bit about my own reaction to that kind of a hypothesis. And then we're going to refresh the rolling year view. Some of you might have seen that on another video, and a calendar year view. And then finally end with AMC earnings. What does that even mean to AMC earnings? If you haven't followed me very long, you might not know um, I have a background in business. I have two master's degrees in business. I led teams that forecast very large business lines across multiple countries. And I know how to sort of look at the entire balance sheet and the income statement of a company. I've actually got like 12 quarters, I think, of AMC balance sheet and income statement data all entered in a local spreadsheet. I nerded out. I've tracked that now day in day out for the movies day in day out, AMC's earnings as they come, um, for like a year now, and so I'm kind of trying to refine for myself how to forecast this. It sounds a little obsessive, and it kind of is, but I've got a lot of money in this play, and I feel like there's some corruption fighting against us. So I like to know the data, and I want to start sharing it with you guys. So I guess I just share that to say, it doesn't mean I'm right by any means, but it does mean I have some background and experience and expertise in this. And so sometime maybe I'll do kind of like I said, I'll kind of show how the sausage is made, show the spreadsheets, show you the level of detail I'm looking at. But just to roll up right now, what I'm saying is I'm looking at every line item in an income statement, all of their income, revenue line items, all their expense line items, and thinking through over time how you can forecast AMC's bottom line using kind of box office numbers and some other things. So I'll go deeper into that. So I suppose today, rather than saying, well, just trust me, I'll just give you my numbers, but also just maybe kind of promise to go through that in more detail in the future. So first off, let's actually check my ability to forecast. So this is now just looking at forecasting box office numbers, not forecasting AMC's earnings. That's two different forecasts I do. So for Q3 last year, locally, basically what I do is I save my initial forecast, so that I can compare kind of, how do I do. I was a little over bullish on Q3, so you can see we missed by about 4%, a little over 4%. And then you can see same thing on Q4, a little bit over bullish, we missed by about 7%. Q4 is fairly explainable. I think both the biggest misses would be kind of, well, actually, there's several. Uh, there's a couple movies that were slated to be released that they got pushed out. So those ended up turning into big fat zeros. And then there was with Puss in Boots and with Avatar: The Way of Water. I had a little too much in Q4 that basically they've had fantastic legs. Like if you're tracking them, they're doing really, really well. And they're actually going to overall beat my numbers for the movie as a whole, but I got it wrong in terms of how much was going to be front loaded into Q4 and how much would spill over into Q1 of this year. So, I mean, now we're enjoying that because that sort of spillover, and then frankly, even beating my overall number means that things are good now. But that did make me miss. So I'm just trying to be transparent with you guys and say I over forecast Q4 there. You can see we missed my forecast. And by the way, I'm talking domestic box office here. I've also maybe shared in other videos or on Twitter that while I'm talking domestic box office, I have a process to translate that into AMC's total revenue. So just, for all our European and Asian friends and friends around the world, South America, I'm not forgetting you. So when I talk AMC's numbers, I'm looking at the total globe. It's just tracking the domestic box office is kind of the most readily available and sort of consistent data for me to track. But I'm looking at the whole globe. So then as far as Q1 of 2023 that we're in right now, I only had forecast 1.6 billion for the domestic box office. So I'm going to talk you through where we're tracking, and just clearly we're tracking way above what I had forecast. So actually, let's go into that. The animation is way out of order here, guys. So we'll just skip all of that. So the original forecast I had on the full year, I had an $8.8 billion domestic forecast. Q1, I told you I had 1.6. Currently, the way things are tracking, and a lot of this actually now already starting to be from actuals. I'm going to talk through a few of the movies and which ones are tracking ahead. But spoiler alert, it's kind of almost all of them. But now for the full year, I would say kind of tracking towards maybe even breaking over 9 billion. So you can see I'm giving a pretty broad range, and I'm going to talk through kind of what it would take to hit that a little bit. I guess really what I would say is I've revised my current quarter forecast. As you can see clearly, I'm saying 1.8 to 1.9 now. I be honest, I'm leaning more towards that 1.9. That's the number I have in my spreadsheet. I'm just trying to give a little leeway if, sooner or later, maybe it's not every single movie that tracks ahead of forecast. Also, by the way, why am I so far under this time? So a couple things happened. One is there were several movies last quarter that just kind of underwhelmed. And so I started feeling like, okay, if there's this many that are sort of coming in under my forecast, I've got to be more careful. I never want to give you guys, false hope. And so I don't want to come out with some crazy number that we can never hit. So that was one. I started revising some numbers down, and I mentioned like Puss in Boots and Avatar. Originally, I had some pretty big numbers this quarter for those, and when they didn't open as strong as I had hoped, I was already taking those numbers down. So I froze this forecast, by the way, as of December 31st. So everything I'm comparing to, I'm saying at December 31st, I had taken these numbers down. I lock it in when we get into the quarter so that I can kind of measure against, kind of a locked in number. But you can see, so for the full year now, we're tracking at 3 to 8% better than I had in that sort of locked in number. And for Q1, we're tracking, 13 to almost 20% above what I had said. And by the way, that's tracking above what the industry was saying as well. I've said in some other videos, I don't only come up with my own numbers. I look across industry analysts, basically various websites, entertainment sort of info websites, as well as then kind of studying past franchise, performance. Like maybe I looked at the first Avatar movie, then what do I think the second will do, that kind of stuff. So what I'm getting at too is you can see for the full year, I've only raised the forecast. Essentially, I've basically only changed the first quarter, guys. So if the rest of the year also keeps tracking ahead of what I said, now here I want to spread a little bit of caution. There are plenty of movies in the rest of the year that I have put some really big forecasts against. I've shared with some of you, like the Mario movie, for example. I think that's going to be a huge hit. I'm going to even show, again, just refresh ourselves on what some of the top movies are for the year. I'll show that in a minute here. But so I guess what I'm saying is I still feel it might be soon for me to just take the whole year up this like 13 to 19% that we're tracking ahead on Q1. That doesn't mean I'm just going to say, all right, the whole year is going to be 13 to 19% ahead. That'd be a big number. In fact, you can see to the right, the full year hitting 10 billion would be just 13.6% above my initial forecast. And Q1 hitting 2 billion would be kind of Sorry, I used to have a range on here. I revised that. I do these things in one take, guys, and so rather than start over, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of let this little hiccup be here. But basically, that's the 25% increase on Q1 if we were to hit 2 billion. But you notice I'm calling this the dream forecast. So it's like, hey, if everything goes right, if we continue to track ahead the rest of the year, and we continue to track ahead the rest of this quarter, and I wasn't only wrong about the movies that have come out so far, all the rest of the movies for the rest of the quarter, let's say I'm wrong about those, and we're just way, way over. And it's like a new norm for movies. Like movies are really back, and we're just gonna fly. So that's a dream forecast. In no way am I saying that. The reason this middle one is called the current forecast, um, that's more the expected case. In forecasting, a lot of times you'll hear something called kind of, best case, worst case, and expected case. So in some ways, that's what you're seeing here. My original forecast is now pretty much the worst case for the year. So the great news is it feels like we're all gravy from here on out on top of that. Like that's starting to feel like the bottom. Um, and currently I'm looking at like a 9 billion plus. And then, if everything went right, and it's a whole lot of things would have to go right, then maybe we could even hit 10 billion. So I'm not forecasting 10 billion. I'm just telling you there's kind of a, 1 in 100 chance, like, or maybe better than 1 in 100, but that we could get there. But let's talk a little bit more about what's been going on. So, what's driving this? Well, Avatar, obviously. So, you can see against my forecast for the quarter, Avatar is now tracking to be $90 million above my forecast. Um, I think there's a lot going on there. First of all, I mentioned it opened a little slower than I had hoped. I had hoped last quarter was going to be huge and just knock our socks off. And it was great. Don't get me wrong. Avatar was really awesome last quarter. I think it was around 400 million plus. Um, but I had expected it to be a little bit bigger, or let's say I had hoped it was going to be a little bit bigger. And so when it wasn't, I had a lot of history on when movies open up, the first couple of weeks at a certain rate, then kind of what's something called their legs. What's the rest of the revenue you can kind of expect? And I was looking at some industry people and what they were saying. Well, then what happened is kind of as soon as we rolled over to the New Year holiday, and even the MLK Junior holiday and some other things, Avatar has just started to show really, really strong legs. And so you can see, like, I think its third weekend was like the second best third weekend ever, and then its fourth weekend was like the second best fourth weekend ever, and then on and on. And we just had, I think, was this maybe the fifth weekend? You think I'd remember that, but I'm getting it a little bit mixed up. But it was like the sixth best ever, and so it's just had really, really strong legs. I allowed myself, I'll just be honest, to get a little bit bummed out, I guess, by it not hitting sort of my hope numbers last quarter. So there was my own, I guess I hopium to myself. And so I had taken the numbers down for this quarter, but now we're tracking 90 million ahead. Puss in Boots, almost the exact same story. Just didn't open up the way I thought it would, but now has had fantastic legs. Fun movie for the family. By the way, I've seen both of these. I loved them both. Um, and so Puss in Boots is tracking at $75 million above my forecast. And both of these, by the way, have already beaten my forecast. There's just a little bit left, obviously, for the rest of the quarter. A Man Called Otto. Guys, Tom Hanks, by all accounts, nailed it. I haven't seen that one, but a lot of my friends keep telling me, like, dude, you need to get over there and go see that. So uh, probably try to get there pretty soon with the family. Don't want to miss that one while it's still in theaters. And that, I'm telling you it's tracking $35 million ahead of my forecast. I actually think even that's wrong. I think it's going to be even higher than that. I'm just trying to be a little bit careful with that. So that one's crushing. Megan is tracking ahead of my forecast. Missing is tracking, opened up stronger than I expected. So now I've already revised my numbers up on that one. Wakanda, even. I mean, that's not like it was new. But I had thought, as it gets close to being on Disney Plus, that would drop off pretty quickly. And really, frankly, as Avatar and Puss in Boots and some of these others, ramped up, that they would sort of steal eyes and sort of butts and seats away from Wakanda. But I mean, it's holding up, considering how long it's been out there. So it's going to beat this quarter's forecast from me by $10 million. Then there's a whole bunch of other movies. I think I've got that here. So like, because of how things have been tracking, and then also looking at what industry analysts are saying, I think I've under forecast Magic Mike, 80 for Brady, Knock at the Cabin, Titanic. All of these look like they're going to beat my numbers as well. And so you can just see across all these movies how great we're performing. And I'm going to talk in a minute, again why what my hypothesis is behind that. But there are risks and opportunities to the rest of the quarter as well. So, for example, there's a whole bunch of yet to be released movies, like all the big ones. You know, I still actually have not changed my original forecast from those. So I don't know yet whether that is kind of really bullish because, hey, if all the things on the left are tracking ahead of my forecast, could the things on the right track ahead? So you see, I mean, Ant Man, Creed 3, Shazam, Haunted Mansion, that's Disney live action, John Wick 4. There's some big movies still coming. Um, I mentioned actually, sorry, on the left bottom, the Magic Mike, 80 for Brady, Knock at the Cabin, and Titanic. I have revised the forecast on those, but these ones here now, I'm telling you, I have not revised the forecast for. But that's also because I have really big numbers against these. Um, like Ant Man, I think I have as pretty much the biggest movie of the quarter, other than Avatar. So got some really big numbers against these. Curious if it can hit them. Shazam might be one. I go back and forth on did I maybe over forecast that one. Just kind of, tipping my hand on some of this. But, whether you want to view that as a risk because I've got a lot of big numbers behind these and, what if we don't hit them? Or an opportunity because everything is tracking ahead of my forecast so far. And I'm telling you, I have not revised my forecast upward on these yet. So those all add up. Basically, all the movies that are yet to be released, whether I've revised them or not, is still 1.2 billion of this quarter. So you can see the majority of the revenue for the quarter is on movies that has not even been released yet. So there's certainly both risk and opportunity behind that. And then I quoted surprises here. So let me. I took a picture. I'm pulling up my phone here. There was a movie. So I looked at the results. I mentioned I track that. I track it on Box Office Mojo. You've probably seen people tweet some of that data before. So I saw today there's a movie this weekend that I had never even heard of that has done $1.5 million this weekend. I had not even heard of this movie. And listen to this name. It's kind of bonkers. This is, I kid you not, this is the name of this movie. You can look it up. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, the movie, Scarlet Bond. I gotta say that again. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, the movie, Scarlet Bond. What the heck is that? I don't even know yet, guys. I need to look. So if you're involved in that movie and you hear this, I apologize. I swear to you, I'm tracking movies that are on the docket to be released. But this happens every quarter to me, and I love it. And so I actually, in my forecast, I have a bucket for just movies I didn't know about or movies I wasn't tracking, or maybe there's some that are, just weren't big enough that I didn't put a forecast against them. So I do forecast for like a big bucket of revenue that I maybe just didn't know about. But when it's this much of a surprise and this big, and suddenly a movie pops up and does 1.5 million in a weekend, um, that's upside. That's pretty much upside. So I'm just saying risks and opportunities for the rest of the quarter. That would be an opportunity. Like maybe there'll be more surprise movies that I'm not really tracking. Okay, let's talk about my hypothesis. So I've got a couple actually here. So the first thing is if you look at when movies were underperforming, I mentioned the last two quarters as a little bit over bullish, and then the industry would have been even more over bullish. If you look at when movies were underperforming and then suddenly overperforming, it actually is time to Avatar. And so, you've probably heard the saying correlation does not prove causation, but I can tell you it's correlated. So movies started overperforming shortly after Avatar was out. And so I'm wondering if there is some causation. And in that case, what I'm saying is, did Avatar bring back, let's say, a population of people who maybe were more reluctant to come back to movies? I don't know. They were enjoying their couch, or they were concerned about germs, viruses, etc. For one reason or another, though, I'm just wondering if a certain group of people saw Avatar, saw some trailers, remembered how much they enjoyed the theaters, had a good experience, and said, you know what, I'm going to come back for some other movies. So that's one possible answer to why are all of these movies suddenly outperforming. And then the other thing, just more broadly speaking about the industry now, is we are seeing there's starting to be more titles rolling out and at a kind of a greater pace. It's like every weekend we're starting to get new releases. And so I wonder if that's also just kind of generally helping the energy and helping the buzz. Maybe you come for Megan, and then you're like, oh, you know what? I haven't seen Puss in Boots yet, and then you go back and see that or something like that. So those are kind of two potential drivers. I'm making that up out of my own head. So, maybe you've got some thoughts on what's going on and why it's improved all that much more. But frankly, it's great. I love it. Just a quick reminder, all the movies, the top movies in 2023, so many of these, like only one of these is out, right? Avatar, The Way of Water. If you'd seen other videos where I talk about this, I knew that Avatar would be one of, in my opinion, one of our top 12 movies. That's why you see it on here, because I knew enough of that revenue would carry over into this year. And you can see at this time, and this is a pretty old forecast, I was telling you that just on the count of movies we would have that are $200 million and up, that we were going to have almost 50% more, so 44% more this year than we did in 2022. So the movie industry is improving. Like we have a lot more big movies. And so if those are going to drive traffic, even back to smaller movies too, I just wonder if we're going to kind of keep snowballing success. And then these don't even show a whole bunch of other movies that frankly I'm super excited about. And we'll see most of these, you know, pause this, screenshot that if you want. Side note, I've been just uploading the videos right away, and I've noticed they upload kind of a standard definition version, and then later like the HD and 4K kind of gets uploaded. So if this is blurry for you, I apologize. Just come back and there'll be a 4K version probably in an hour or two. But tons of big movies. Only one of those is out so far. Avatar. So much is coming to us soon. And so if you've seen some of my tweets or other videos, I keep telling you guys Q2 through Q3 especially, and really once Ant-Man comes out, from the moment Ant-Man comes out all the way until, I don't know, the end of September or something, we are just, I keep using the phrase, we're going to be moving from strength to strength. And that's not even as big as 2024 is going to be. I believe we're about to see kind of anywhere from 6 to 10 quarter, you'll just keep seeing like a best ever post-COVID quarter. Oh, never mind, new best ever post-COVID quarter. Whoops, never mind, new one. We're going to just be rolling through, a resurgence in the movie industry. And this you do not have to take my word for. I've shown you in some other videos where you can go look at every single movie by date that's coming out, and how to go look at maybe industry forecasts, how to look at past franchise history. So I'm basing what I'm telling you on specifics around movies coming out, not just on me making up a number out of the air. Speaking of which, so one thing I track is a rolling 4 quarters. So the reason I do that is I just say, all right, if we were to call the most recent quarter the end of a year of a box office, how are we tracking? And so you can see like a few of these are actuals. So like here was the year that ended Q2 of 22. So this ended last June. So at the end of last June, we had tracked barely above 7 billion for a year. Well, that makes sense because you're including like half of 2021, which is when we were still trying to kind of really open up post-COVID and all that. And then you can see we popped, the reason this one kind of popped, I think you get it into, actually I was going to say, I think you get into like the Spider-Man release was at the end of 2021. And then of course also you're dropping kind of an old low quarter to put in a newer kind of bigger quarter. What we just finished, Q4 22, so you can see that was a bit of a dip. I've shown you in another video about how we could see that coming. We knew about that. But look at this. So the quarter we're in now, this is now based on my current forecast. I told you I revised that upward. We are shooting up to what in effect would be the best year we've had post-COVID, the best 4 quarters in a row. Clearly by far the highest. Look at how high, like almost to $8 billion too on just these last 4 quarters, Q2 22 through Q1 23. And then you go up a little bit. This is just kind of, again, has to do with, because this is a rolling year, and I'm going to show you a full year in a minute, which quarter you're dropping out and then which new quarter you're adding in. So, but you can see 1, 2, oops, cheating and showing you ahead of time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if I was to draw this out through 2024, you'd kind of see it keep going up and to the right. And you can see just how steep that is. I'll talk in a few minutes as well about AMC's results. What I'm really telling you guys is based on the movies that are coming out, some of them at the end of this quarter. So in other words, a lot of that revenue goes into Q2, and then through Q2, and then what comes out at the end of Q2 that spills to Q3, and then through Q3, we have two really big quarters coming up. Q2, you're going to see, in my opinion, the box office numbers will be the biggest post COVID that we've had yet. And then Q3 will turn around and say, yeah, hold my beer, because now I'm the new biggest post COVID quarter yet. And then Q4 will kind of, if you didn't have Q2 and Q3, Q4 would actually maybe be the biggest post COVID quarter. Only it's going to have to compare to this Q2 and Q3 that are huge. So in my mind, Q3 is our biggest quarter of all. You get, some of these huge movies are going to put their revenue in that quarter, kind of. But Q2 and Q3 are just going to be huge. We're going to have like an awesome summer into fall. Man, I'm excited. So you can see my forecast, but again, also kind of takes into account a lot of the industry forecasts. So it's not just, some AMC hopium bro kind of a thing. Okay, but how does that look for the full year? And the reason that matters is AMC's results, like earnings per share, all that stuff that you see, that's based on a calendar year. So the quarters, starts in January, ends in December. That's why we're in Q1 right now. So you can see, obviously, 2021, we just were reopening. 2022, we were kind of saying, hey, movies actually, in many ways, we proved the theatrical window in 2022. Now 2023 is the Hollywood supply chain starting to catch up. And then, in my opinion, 2024 is sort of off to the races. And then beyond that, forget it. Like, it's not even a conversation anymore, because that Hollywood supply chain would really have caught up. And so you can see I'm now saying, as a current forecast, that $9 billion for the year, which, I showed you on the first slide. And then 2024, my current forecast is 9.8. But boy, if we keep tracking ahead, I haven't even touched the 2024 forecast. I'm just leaving it. It's so far out, and there's a lot of runway between now and then. Let's learn more first, and then I'll kind of revise that if I need to. But so for now, just again, up and to the right. And so we start to look at, I think I wanted to mention actually, if you look at the quarters we have, for me, man, I've wanted to be careful about this for a while because I don't want to mislead anybody. So before I say these next few things, let me remind you something I've told some of you if you've been watching me. There's a saying in forecasting that if you have a forecast, it's wrong. Like, I'm predicting the future, right? And if I was able to do that perfectly with a crystal ball, I'd be a mega billionaire, because I would know everything that's going to happen and be able to invest or even bet accordingly. So I am telling you a forward-looking statement based on my knowledge and my research that could be wrong. But I'll just say it this way. Because of the movies out there, Q3 just feels to me like almost certain profits. And I mean the bottom line being a positive number. Q2 is our next best shot. I'll be honest, I do have a positive number forecast for AMC's bottom line in Q2. I feel a little more iffy about that, especially since, guys, what I won't ever know is, I don't have insider information. There could be investment decisions. There could be the timing of expenses that Adam and the executive team decide to take strategically. There could be debt pay downs. There's a lot of different things they could do. Even just opening a new property. Certainly we all wonder if maybe some of these Regal properties are going to get bought. Does he go into Canada? There's a lot of things that could happen that I am not forecasting. Okay, so that said, based on current business trends, and I'm all the way into what's their food and beverage, what's their box office take, what are their expenses on things like depreciation and taxes, and the cut they give back to the studios and all that stuff. So based on that, like I said, possible profits in Q2, probable profits in Q3, small chance at profit. I shouldn't say small, but a chance at profits in Q4. Right now, I do have a negative number in that quarter. Pardon me. But, that's far enough out, too, that there's movies I don't know about. So I'm hoping, look at this last Christmas season, Violent Night did... Well, first of all, I wouldn't have known about that. That one got announced pretty late. And that would be one, if something like that happened again this year, it would improve that fourth quarter forecast that I have. Like, that one did well. So if there's some movies that come in, or attendance just continues to climb, something like that, um, I believe that there's a chance at profits in Q4. And then Q1, even as bullish as this is, as much as we've improved against my forecast, I do still have a loss on that. So I'll show you that, but also looking like potentially maybe the best um, AMC quarter post COVID. I'd have to go double check that. But so my original forecast for the full year, I had us losing $108 million. That's the full bottom line. I even think about things like currency conversions, from the euro. So if our friends, um, let's say English apes, are attending Odeon, well, that gets translated from the British pound or the sterling or whatever. Sorry, guys, I should get my language right on that one for you. Um, but we translate that over to dollars, and that's how AMC reports their financial results. So the bottom line has a whole lot of stuff in it that I'm looking at. But I was seeing the full year as losing about 110 million, and then Q1 was losing 160 of that. So what that tells you actually is Q2 through Q4, I have actually a net positive. So I mean, hey, 3 quarters combined, if you add them all up, we're actually gaining. And I had told you that I think as far back as last September, I did a very long forecasting video. Apologies, because that one's like an hour and a half or something. But I went through a lot of details, and I told you um, that was coming. That those 3 quarters, we just needed to get through this Q1, and then cash flows in particular are going to start looking positive, in my opinion. Um, again, that's a forecast. I could be wrong, and there's a lot of insider information I'm missing. So take that with a lot of caution. But my belief is Q2 onward, we start having positive cash flows, and then we start having positive earnings to the bottom line, and things just start really rolling. And I guess actually why you should be hearing that I'm so excited is that Q1 is feeling ahead of schedule. I don't mean positive earnings. I'm still, in fact, I'll show you, still forecasting a loss on earnings this quarter. But I mean, you can see that's a 50% improvement versus my forecast. You might ask, okay, wait, retail, if you go way back on the early slide, you showed me that, maybe the quarter's tracking, let's say in the teens above your forecast in terms of the box office. How could the earnings jump 50% on Q1? So that, I'm going to oversimplify here. I won't explain all of it. But the biggest thing I'll say is if you have fixed costs, so I talked about that in another video once too. AMC's got a heavy fixed cost model. So you've got things like rents, you've got debt payments. Well, some of these are just the same cost every quarter, no matter what. That's what a fixed cost is. So if you have fixed costs, when your revenue goes up, there starts becoming, so for a while, you're like taking in revenue to cover your costs. And there comes a point where now the revenue you're taking in, you're just kind of keeping because you've already covered your fixed costs. There's not more cost on that. So they have some variable costs as well. And I've gone through that before. I'll try to simplify all that and do a much shorter video and go through that soon. It's actually also why you can find an old video of mine where I say, hey, AMC's business model is better post-COVID than it was pre-COVID, because I can show you how many of their costs have actually improved and how many of their revenue items are actually better. I won't do that now, but the point is, they've reached a tipping point where as the box office improves, they're kind of going to be keeping more and more of that money. So it's a pretty big deal. And then don't forget, as traffic improves, then you're not only getting admissions revenue, you're getting food and beverage revenue. So foot traffic to AMC is a big deal. And so these movies overperforming, bringing more people who are potentially buying merchandise, who are buying food and beverage, it's a big deal. So that's why the big jump here in terms of a percent of improving on the loss. And then you can see the full year. I told you earlier, I didn't really update the out quarters. Just very small. I think I put like $5 million in each for just kind of those surprise movies. But I really didn't update Q2 through Q4, only updated Q1, and you can see I'm showing maybe a full year loss of only $25 million. It's a pretty big improvement. That 77% improvement could be a pretty big deal. So we'll see. And then sort of this dream forecast. That was that $10 billion box office. What would that look like? Well, we'd have a full year profit, first of all. Huge profit, actually. To go from my original forecast $110 million loss to that being a $200 million profit. That'd be a pretty huge swing. And obviously, Shorty would be in a lot of trouble if AMC has a full year of profits. Um, Side note, I do believe 2024 will be full year profits. And you can see, with my current forecast, gosh, we're sniffing it. Um, I have a feeling I could be wrong here. Last quarter, I was wrong on AMC's losses. Of course, a lot of that had to do with the box office itself and the attendance. Um, so I don't know. When it comes to forecasting the box office, I can be real close, real easy. When it comes to forecasting the bottom line of AMC, I've still got work to do, and in particular because sometimes their expenses, there's one-offs that I don't see coming sometimes. But if we did that dream scenario, you see pretty big profits, and as well pretty big improvement in Q1. Even that top Q1 scenario I said, I think that was like 1.9 billion or something like that. Um, Sorry, maybe it was two. Uh, I'm not suggesting profits in Q1 either way. So I don't think that's going to happen unless there are some tricks Adam had up his sleeve. There's certainly ways you can time transactions and financial events. If he's been leading up to this and has been preparing the company for a good Q1, that's possible. But he's always told us Q1 is your lightest quarter, which also is where you should hear how bullish I am because, guys, we're in the middle of what's going to be the smallest quarter of the year, and it's tracking this well. That's just awesome. So, what you should just hear is so far, in fact, why don't I just go back to make it really easy to see this one? Okay. So far, all of these movies on the left are tracking ahead of both my forecast and the industry forecast. That's starting to feel like a trend to me. Now, granted, we're only just over 3 weeks into the month, but day in, day out, the numbers are coming in better than forecast, both by the industry and by me. And let's just track that. If that's going to continue, we're all going to have to start even upping our expectations, which is a far cry from some places we've been the last 2 years in our whole experience, right? So, and then what's more, I'm telling you, kind of look at the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is the way I've started to word it on Twitter too. I believe we've come through the hardest part. We will not have a lower quarter for a long time. This quarter is going to be, let's say, 1.9 billion domestic box office. That would put it at, I don't know, the third-ish, maybe third or fourth best quarter post-COVID. And then all of the next few quarters would kind of, as of this moment in time, be the best ever quarter post-COVID. Like, we're there. Ant-Man's coming out here in a couple of weeks. The movies that are out now are tracking great. You're just going to see new record after new record for post-COVID. And so I just, be encouraged, be happy. Honestly, it's coming. And so, I'm not talking about whether that ends stock market manipulation, price action manipulation, all the things that come with that. But I am saying in terms of business results, Shorty can't fake that. And revenue is going to be coming in, and we're going to be celebrating a whole lot. And at some point, Shorty's going to say, holy cow, these guys, not only were they right, but now I cannot any longer deny that they're right, that this company is not going bankrupt, that the industry has recovered, and we go from strength to strength at that point, and then they're realizing that they're burning cash to hold their position, and at some point give up, right? That's just the thesis. We can outweight them. Well, guess what? We basically have, in my opinion. We are to the part where the industry now is going to do the job for us. So, let's go.